The big news first, obviously, is the breaking information first reported by the New York Times that the Justice Department, namely U.S. Attorney John Durham, who was appointed by Attorney General Barr to investigate the origins and the manipulation of our intelligence community in terms of the SpyGate targeting of President Trump. The New York Times reported first that it is now a criminal investigation. Now, it confirms our suspicions that the initial investigation was not a criminal investigation, despite what everyone was saying. It was an initial inquiry, it was an administrative review. Obviously, they found something big to justify escalating it into a criminal investigation. Well, finally, it's long past due, and it is something the deep state is very angry about. It is the real reason, the fear of this type of development was the real reason for the impeachment coup against President Trump. Judicial Watch has been in the forefront of pushing the Justice Department publicly to do a serious criminal investigation. We think it should have been done immediately by the Trump administration, but of course, the deep state wouldn't allow that. Jeff Sessions made the horrible decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. And then Rod Rosenstein, in league with Andrew McCabe, the anti-Trumper, then wrongly and improperly appointed and corruptly appointed Special Counsel Mueller to harass the president for 2 years. So therefore, the whole Russia hoax canard was uninvestigated. In fact, it was pursued aggressively against President Trump through the corrupt Mueller investigation. So thankfully, the president fired Jeff Sessions, which in my view was the most significant personnel decision of his presidency thus far, and hired Attorney General Barr. And Attorney General Barr came in, saw what was up with Mueller, and I don't know this for a fact, but essentially he gave them the message that you need to finish this up. It's going nowhere, you need to finish it up. I think if President Trump hadn't fired Sessions, the Mueller investigation would probably still be going on, harassing and abusing President Trump and all sorts of other innocent Americans. So then Barr said, look, we're going to investigate this issue. He had concerns about the basis for the so-called counterintelligence investigation that morphed into this criminal investigation into President Trump's connections to Russia, which were zilch. And now the administration has found, or the Justice Department has found, enough information to generate a criminal inquiry, which means that you'll finally get a grand jury, potentially, that is serious about getting to the bottom of what went on with the illicit targeting President Trump. Needless to say, the deep state is furious. Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff have denounced it, suggested the Justice Department isn't independent. Well, it isn't independent. Not under our Constitution. The Justice Department reports to the President of the United States. It's the big lie that it's independent that led to the abuses of the Justice Department and the FBI to harass and target President Trump as if he reported to them as opposed to the other way around. It's that abuse of power by Justice Department officials who, quote, think they're independent that led to this terrible corruption scandal, the worst in modern American history for sure. So it's good news, however belated, that there's a criminal investigation into SpyGate targeting. And what I suspect is generated this, and I've talked to you about this before, is the idea that the whole Russiagate thing was a fraud to begin with, in the sense that there was never a good faith basis by the Justice Department or the FBI or anyone else involved in any of this to believe that the Trump campaign was an agent of Russia and colluding with Russia. There was never a good faith basis. The dossier, when you look at the dossier paid for by the FBI, written with the help of the Kerry State Department, paid for by the Democratic National Committee, paid for by the Clinton campaign, it's obviously a fraud. It's kooky. When you read it, you say this is crazy town. But the FBI pretended it was serious enough to justify spying on the Trump team. And then you have details about this Joseph Misfud, who supposedly has connections to Russia intelligence, but is more likely a Western intelligence source. It's as strongly suggested. And then you've got all this spying going on the Trump campaign through Stephen Halper and other illegal targeting of the president or then candidate Trump and people around him. And I think what they're going to find is that all of this so-called intelligence that the Russians were colluding with Trump came out of the CIA and FBI, that there really was no independent corroboration of it. And I've called it the self-licking ice cream cone. Who are your sources? Me, myself, and I. That was the Justice Department, FBI approach to targeting Trump. And of course, you had this base motive for doing it, which is Strzok and Page admitting in the text messages they hated Trump. You have Andrew Weissman, the deputy guy under Mueller, who was also handling this investigation. We'll talk about him later. Notorious anti-Trumper, pro-Hillary Clinton. So there was all this motive to create and concoct this. And I think, based on all the various reports, is that Barr and Durham, in their initial review, figured out that the basis for the Russia intelligence investigation was a fraud, at least as it relates to targeting President Trump. Now, there may have been concerns that the Russians were spending $100,000 or so on fake Facebook accounts to mess with our elections and support Trump one day, support Hillary the other day, and then someone else on the third day. But that's not the issue. The issue was that the FBI and the Justice Department went beyond that and suggested there was some sort of collusion. And there was never, they didn't have any independent information. So when, for instance, the dossier references Russia intelligence sources, I suspect we're going to find in the end there were no Russia intelligence sources. And to the degree they were, quote, Russia intelligence sources, they were probably working for us too. And it was that fraud that I think is generating this criminal inquiry. We'll see. But the deep state's very nervous about it. The Democratic media complex is nervous about it. And so you can see also why the coup was instituted and the impeachment inquiry was instituted against President Trump, because they knew this was coming. I mean, Schiff knew what was happening. He knew what had been done. He was intimately involved with all of this. He may as well have had a seat on the board of directors of Fusion GPS or been a partner, or whatever I don't know what the corporate structure is. But the point being that they all were in on it. So they knew what Barr, if left to his own devices, was going to find. So what do you do to inoculate yourself from a criminal investigation? Suggest it's in retaliation for impeachment. And what do you do to get an impeachment inquiry going? Despite knowing there's no basis for it, you concoct a fraudulent charge related to Ukraine. More of the same. So this whole impeachment inquiry is kabuki theater designed to protect those who really did, in my view, significant criminal acts to target President Trump and victimize him. And what are the crimes potentially? There are whole legions of crimes. You've got conspiracy, you have civil rights violations, you have fraud, all sorts of things. And the Justice Department can't act on this soon enough. They need to move quickly. They need to start being serious about this. And I appreciate the news that they've got the grand jury power. But you know, what are they going to do? Are they going to exercise it? Are they going to go after those who need investigation and bring them in and haul them in before grand juries? If you want these abuses to stop, you need to be willing to enforce the rule of law, even against the most powerful in our political system. Who has to worry about this? Who should be worrying about this? Well, Barack Obama should be worrying about this. Vice President Biden should be worried about this. James Clapper should be worried about this. John Brennan, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, Loretta Lynch, James Baker, former general counsel for the FBI, Bruce Orr, Nellie Orr, Glenn Simpson, Fusion GPS, Hillary Clinton, Bruce Orr, Nellie Orr, obviously Christopher Steele, who knows who else? John Kerry. The State Department was a center of anti-Trump activity on Russiagate. That needs to be investigated. CIA was spying on Trump, it's pretty clear, based on all the publicly available information. The outrage is, why is it taking so long? Now, do I think anything's going to happen? I don't know. I'm hopeful. As you know, I've been suspicious. You had this Comey IG report that came out delineating, well, actually they had referred Comey for criminal investigations. And Justice Department dropped the ball there. Will they drop the ball here? I don't know. The SpyGate report may have played a role in escalating this to a criminal inquiry. We'll see. We can be hopeful, but Judicial Watch never takes it for granted that the right thing will be done. I mean, otherwise we would have shut down years ago. Oh, the Justice Department's investigating this. Oh, don't worry, they were investigating Clinton emails. Oh, don't worry, Congress is investigating Benghazi. Oh, don't worry, Congress is investigating the IRS. Oh, don't worry, Congress is investigating Fast and Furious. Oh, don't worry, we have a new Justice Department. They'll take care of the Hillary Clinton issue, finally. They'll investigate SpyGate. Well, it's 3 years later, none of that's been done substantially. So obviously better late than never, but Judicial Watch is not going to stop. And we've got nearly 60 lawsuits at this point targeting the deep state conspiracy against President Trump and you, the American people, and our Constitution. And virtually everything we know about the illicit targeting of President Trump is as a result of Judicial Watch's work, either directly or indirectly. And you can bet this Justice Department investigation would never have happened but for the incessant pressure of Judicial Watch, other independent operators and investigators like Sarah Carter and John Solomon, pressure from intrepid members of Congress like Devin Nunes, Meadows, Jordan, Gates, people like that, Chuck Grassley. None of this would be proceeding as it ought to without the pressure of Judicial Watch. And what I mean by pressure, I mean you. Because we only are able to get the word out because of your support. And obviously, you help us get the word out by looking at our information, sharing it, spreading it, demanding action from your members of Congress. And we get the results. I always talk about Judicial Watch does the heavy lifting. It's this heavy lifting that gets these results that result in criminal investigations. There's more than enough information that Judicial Watch has uncovered on SpyGate, the collusion, the payments, the corruption. They didn't even need a grand jury. They could have taken all our FOIA documents and started issuing indictments based on that. I exaggerate only slightly. But it's there. So we can take credit for at least this positive development. Now, I hope it results in serious prosecutions. We'll see. But you were never going to get a prosecution if you didn't have a criminal inquiry. And as I've been warning you, there hadn't been a criminal inquiry until, as we just learned, at least today. So we'll see what happens. It's good news. The Judicial Watch takes a good deal of credit in forcing the Justice Department to do the right thing here, or at least the appearance of the right thing. Well, we have to maintain our healthy skepticism here. But we'll see what happens. And so, as I said, in the meantime, Judicial Watch will continue to uncover the truth. And, we're having success in terms of even getting Congress to even begin contemplating doing the right thing. So you've got the Cuckoo Ball continuing in Congress. You had the members of the House Republicans caucus. Some of them showed up at this secret hearing room, the SCIF as it's called, to protest essentially and demand access to the testimony of improperly obtained, in my view, of at least in this case, the protest took place during a Defense Department officials when she was about to testify. Look, I recognize it's a political operation when the Republicans do that. But we also recognize when the Democrats are doing secret hearings and then leaking selectively the material from those hearings without the full context, that's also a political operation. So I recognize you've got competing political operations going on. The Republicans obviously defending President Trump, the Democrats pursuing their impeachment against him. The question is, what's the rule of law? Who's on the side of the rule of law here? And of course, Judicial Watch is. The Republicans sometimes are. Sometimes the Democrats end up being on the side of the rule of law, depending on the issue. Just because it's the other side from many of you doesn't mean they're always wrong. Sometimes someone in the Trump administration does something wrong. It's possible, yes, it's possible. And it's not the Trump administration's friends who are going to call attention to it, it's his political enemies. And just because your political enemy says you did something wrong, it doesn't mean that they are wrong about it. You may question their motives, you may question their hypocrisy, you may question whether or not they're just calling the kettle, what is it? The pot calling the kettle black. But that's the reality of what's going on here in Washington, D.C. now. And you can trust Judicial Watch to kind of call it as we see it. The Republicans have no power in the House effectively to stop an abusive impeachment of President Trump. They don't. By numbers, there's nothing they can do. But the only power they have is to persuade the American voters that the process is inappropriate. And that's what they're trying to do. The more substantial power is exercised by the Senate, who have the power to try impeachments or officials impeached by the House. And it's been only Judicial Watch that has been pushing for the Senate to say no to the coup. Stop the coup. Don't buy into the big lie that you are required by the Constitution to have a trial when the House abusively impeaches someone like President Trump, and that the Senate should say, no, we're not going to participate in this process. And we were the only ones saying it, at least I was. Maybe someone else is saying it, it's a big world. But in terms of high-profile groups and individuals here in Washington, D.C., we were virtually alone in highlighting this issue. The Senate should say no to the coup. And sure enough, Senator Lindsey Graham, who's been criticized correctly, in my view, for not doing enough to expose this from his perch at the Judiciary Committee, this being the coup attack and also the corruption involved in setting the president up on Ukraine and the other issues that have arisen in terms of corruption over the last year or so. Senator Lindsey Graham has a resolution that I think has almost every Republican on it, I'm not sure what the current number is, condemning the Democratic coup attack. Now, does it go as far as I want it to go? No. But nothing like it was on the table until Judicial Watch started yelling about it and you started calling your senators' offices. So this resolution seems like it might be a good start, but the Republicans need to understand that the current process is illicit, violative of the rule of law, an abuse of the powers given to the House to impeach elected officials such as President Trump. The process under which they're impeaching President Trump is without precedent in terms of denying the president basic rights. And let me say this, I don't think the administration is objecting strongly enough to the impeachment. Obviously, President Trump is calling it a coup. He said stop the coup. He's tweeting Judicial Watch to last our material on this issue. But all these witnesses are going to testify on Capitol Hill. For the life of me, I don't understand why the administration is not rushing to court. Why isn't the administration rushing the court to stop the testimony and preserve the president's prerogatives, preserve the president's civil rights, and preserve classified information? Because these leaks, because of the work we do under the Freedom of Information Act, we know, I have a good instinct for when material is classified and what type of material typically is classified. And when the government is describing the reactions of foreign governments to policies and discussions from the United States, that is almost invariably classified. And what I see is a lot of discussion by deep state officials, some of whom are, I guess, technically Trump appointees, but obviously no fans of the president, of classified matters. And that is being leaked willy-nilly. The administration is letting it be generated or provided to the House outside the regular process. I don't understand why it's happening. Well, I do, but something needs to be done about it. And let me just say this about the complaints about the president in Ukraine. And again, I think I'm the only one who says the president has, other than the president, he has nothing to be embarrassed about Ukraine. The Obama administration worked, and I'm sure this is why Durham is criminally investigating it, worked with a half a dozen countries, it looks like, to target President Trump in an unprecedented spy operation to target candidate Trump and then President Trump. They used virtually every intelligence agency's resources to target him. It was all hands on deck to target him. One of the countries involved in this was Ukraine. And the idea that the President of the United States, when he's being asked to sign off on a check for $500 million or almost $1 billion, whatever the number is, without asking questions about what the heck's going on. Why are you protecting Biden? What did you do with your involvement in the election? I want some accountability. A core presidential function as the leader of the country to conduct foreign policy. And they're going to impeach him over that? Meanwhile, we're all supposed to take a nap when told and fall asleep when we're told that Obama worked with 6 countries, or maybe 2, maybe 3, it doesn't matter, to spy on his political opponent? Barack Obama should be the target of an impeachment inquiry if the House was honest. And you may say, well, he's no longer president, he can't be impeached. That's not true. And I say that knowing that President Obama isn't going to be impeached, but the point is the abuse of power, the illicit use of government resources to attack your political opposition occurred during the Obama administration. And for President Trump to follow up on that and say what went on and who was involved, and I want accountability before I send tax dollars over there, which, by the way, ended up going, perfectly appropriate. They try to pretend it's a quid pro quo, as if it's improper to demand accountability for taxpayer expenditures. And to see these State Department officials who at the same time they're protecting Hillary Clinton. I've talked to you repeatedly. They're protecting Hillary Clinton, the bureaucracy over there. They did it during the administration of Barack Obama on our emails, and they continue to this day. And the same bureaucracy is basically running over each other to cooperate with the Cuckoo Ball in the House to target Trump. These ambassadors didn't like the president's policy on Ukraine. And obviously they didn't care that Ukraine was corrupt. They didn't care when the State Department resources were being used to spy on Trump, but now it's the end of the world that Trump had delayed an aid package for 6 weeks over this core corruption that threatens our republic. You call it a quid pro quo. I call it the president doing his job. I'm tired of everyone running away from the issue. You hear these deep state bureaucrats whining about the president because they didn't want to gum up whatever their public policy was on Ukraine. I don't know about you, but I object to sending any money to Ukraine. If you want to give them guns and weapons, that's fine, because there's a military and strategic relationship there. But aid, that's always a waste of money. It's always a waste of money. So what's going to happen? The Democrats are going to rush to impeachment. And it's interesting, they've backed off 2 things. Oh, this whistleblower, the most important person in the world, the hero of the republic. They don't want him to testify. Why? Because of the corruption involved in the leak to Adam Schiff and Schiff's subsequent lies. 2, the secrecy. Everyone was yelling about the Republicans showing up and making the point about the illegal secrecy. Oh, the next day the Democrats assured the public and said, oh, we're going to have public hearings. Now, they're obviously not going to be sufficient as a matter of due process, but 2 issues that the Democrats have backed away from because of corruption, called out on their corruption. 1 is the cover-up of the whistleblower. 2, they admit it's been too secret and they are committing to public hearings. This is why you always have got to be fighting for the rule of law. You assume because the politicians are doing it one way, they can't change their mind. They do it all the time. And don't presume that a politician who disagrees with you won't hear you if you call them up and say, this is my view. I encourage, if Democrats in Republican districts should call Republicans. Republicans in Democratic districts should call their Democratic representatives. I mean, some of them are not going to, I appreciate, some offices are not going to care what your views are if they don't share your philosophy. But in my experience, all politicians care what their constituents think. The smart ones do. And you can see the Democrats are backing off a little bit. So keep up the pressure. Push for the rule of law. I'm glad Lindsey Graham is doing this in the Senate. I'm glad Republicans are standing up, at least rhetorically, against the impeachment effort. It's a first step. We'll see what else needs to be done. But it shows you why Judicial Watch keeps on doing the work we do independently, because Congress is a mess. It's a political institution. I appreciate that. And we do legal work, and we're in court to get the documents. Congress is doing something else, and it isn't designed to get to the truth.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all the latest news from Judicial Watch.